Well, it's always interesting to have new works presented to us or written for us to play. But at the same time, there are so many fantastic, I mean, this is the great thing about the string quartet repertoire is that, if you like, the new works form a very, very tiny tip of an enormous iceberg, and there's quality all the way down.
Considering we don't specialise in any particular area of the repertoire, really, we like to keep our repertoire broad. We do play a lot of new works, and we commission and have commissioned for us a lot of new Australian works. We're lucky that we have a good relationship with most of the composers in Australia who we perform their music. We've worked a lot with Peter Sculthorpe, for example, but also Carl Vine, Ross Edwards, Matthew Heinsohn. We've worked with them over a number of years as well, and not just in the string quartet, but also in our larger Australia ensemble. So we've got a breadth of understanding of not just the new work, but their previous works. And I think that gives us a good context in which to place the new work. We'll generally have, a few rehearsals, read through it a few times, get some ideas before we meet with the composer for the first time. Obviously, we don't want to sight read in front of them necessarily.
But there's nothing quite like that very first rehearsal when you sit down and you either say, yes, we have an absolute diamond here, or you say, have we still got the receipt? Which occasionally happens, but very rarely. The one thing you're really afraid of when you do sit down with a composer for the first time is when they say, oh, and they look a bit taken aback, and that doesn't sound the way I want it to. And you're playing it as well as you think you can, but somehow you're not giving the composer what they were hearing in their heads, and that's one barrier that you try to break down very early on and try to get through to what they want to hear. Very often we will work with the composer, so that's a very helpful part of the process. The composer will give us their ideas and maybe some of their thinking behind the composition of it.
It's really getting a grasp on their style, so that it's hard to make the music come to life off the page. There are only so many ways you can write it, but there are a million different ways you can play it. So it's really being familiar with their style and hearing from them what they're hearing in their head, and then you can make that happen.
And then it's just a question of sitting down and playing it, and hopefully the composer has enough instructions in there in terms of tempi and the way the music should be played.
We did a string quartet, his first string quartet, and we premiered the clarinet quintet last year. And he's definitely got his own flavour. It's a little bit quirky. The string quartet was on a kind of Australian theme. It has and actually the clarinet quintet has some of that as well, sort of bush ballads, and there's one movement in the string quartet, wasn't it, that's like a Bondi tram, and so it's quite Australian, and he's always got a great sense of humour in his writing.